The North Dakota State Bison lost this year's FCS National Championship game, which is surprising when you consider that they have won 9 national championships since 2011. At one point, they had a run of 5 straight championships, and they've only failed to make the national title game twice in that window. With about 15 current NFL players, they've had more talent pass through their program than teams like Kansas State and Indiana, which are in the Big 12 and the Big 10. And in 2016, they also beat the Iowa Hawkeyes in their stadium. And they were ranked number 13 at that time. And since that moment, there has always been talk of the Bison moving up to FBS. Many lesser-known teams, like Jacksonville State and even Abilene Christian, have been preparing to make their transition to FBS. So why is North Dakota State staying put in the FCS? And the answer is simple. They don't want to join the FBS. And here's why. From a pure football perspective, North Dakota State doesn't really have a clear landing spot when they look for a conference in FBS. They are located in the northernmost part of the Midwest, where there are hardly any FBS programs for them to play against. And the Big 10, which has programs like Nebraska, might be a landing spot until you consider that they would never let an FCS call-up program into the Big 10. The Mountain West Conference might be their best option if they were to go up to FBS. But they have programs that are as far away as California, and Colorado State would still be their closest rival inside the conference. That is still more than 800 miles away. And yes, ACC programs might travel 800 miles to go to a game, but that's because they're in the ACC with national television money in order for them to afford it. To be completely honest, the Mountain West probably isn't a big enough draw to make joining FBS worthwhile for North Dakota State. And if they were to go independent, they would still have the same problem of having to travel more than 800 miles to find a legitimate opponent. That's not really feasible unless you're Notre Dame. And when it comes down to recruiting, North Dakota State would be at a legitimate disadvantage if they went up to the FBS level. Their success in FCS comes from their ability to keep the top athletes in their state home to play for the Bison. This has worked incredibly well for them at the FCS level, where they only need to fill out a few key positions with players like maybe Trey Lance, who's from nearby Minnesota, in order for them to be able to compete at the national championship level and do so year in, year out. As talented as the Bison are, if they were to go up to FBS right now, they would be not much more than a middle-of-the-road program. And when your college is located in Fargo, North Dakota, it's not going to be easy to convince a top recruit to choose North Dakota over places like Los Angeles or even perhaps Miami. The potential impact of NIL only further tips the scales away from programs like North Dakota State, because as an FCS program, any recruit getting attention from other FCS teams is going to take them seriously. But in FBS, they are going to have significant competition now for just about any recruit that they are targeting. The Bison would likely need to overhaul their entire recruiting system in order to compete legitimately at the FBS level. And that's just to get a chance to play in a bowl game, like maybe the New Era Pinstripe Bowl. Underneath this entire conversation is the fact that North Dakota State is not just a football team, but they represent an entire athletic department. And trying to become a full member of any FBS conference would put pressure on their entire athletic department that they cannot afford to handle. In order to transition up to FBS, the college would first need to sponsor 2 more varsity sports teams at the Division I level, because all FBS programs need to represent a department that has at least 16 varsity sports. And of the sports teams that they currently have, North Dakota State competes in the Summit League Conference. And those sports teams are, for the most part, middle of the road in this small Division I conference. Nothing against the Summit League, but that's a step down from the Mountain West, or just about anywhere else they could land. Recruiting across the entire department would need to be overhauled, and finances would need to be put into the department in order to support the chains. Because whatever conference they go to, let's just keep the Mountain West in mind, you're going to now need to travel across 800 miles or more just to play a volleyball game or a basketball game in the regular season. It would be nearly impossible for them to keep up with the cost of simply traveling their teams to and from away games across the entire department. This is unless their football team and their basketball teams were at the very least able to turn a significant profit. And when you transition up to FBS, that doesn't happen overnight. They would have to endure some dark days ahead before they would see the light at the end of the tunnel. North Dakota State is an FCS powerhouse, and they could probably hold their own in just about any of the Group of 5 conferences across FBS right now. But that wouldn't do much for the athletic department, because people like to see a winner, and North Dakota State wins a lot right now. By virtue of circumstance, Fargo, North Dakota just is not strategically located in FBS territory. So conferences can continue to call, and the Bison will probably pick up the phone, but it is highly unlikely that they'll be able to offer them a deal that is worth accepting. And as more and more teams continue to make the jump up to FBS, it does appear that competition for the Bison will be few and far between. So even after this year's championship loss, their dynasty, the North Dakota State Bison football dynasty, perhaps the greatest run in modern college football history, will continue. And the FCS world will just have to deal with it.